Selective mutism. This case of the week is around selective mutism. We'll say his name is Max. We'll say he's 6. We're changing all of this information, obviously, to protect the child. But the parents of Max brought him to see me because he had selective mutism. Now, what is selective mutism, right? Selective mutism is basically when children stop talking selectively. And it was really strange because Max was actually fine. At home, he was a chatty little bird, and he was social, and he was fine with his family. If Max had select friends that he knew and they did safe play dates, he was fine. But then the second Max would go to school, it's like, boop, choop, boop, 4 to 6 hours at a time. Just no talk. No conversation. He was getting therapy. There's actually a type of therapy to help kids learn how to speak through their, whatever the heck this is. So, I was talking to the parents. I'm like, tell me more. And they're like, yeah, at home he's fine. At school he just chooses not to talk. I'm like, chooses not to talk? That's kind of strange, right? Yeah, I mean, why would a young child choose to not talk for hours at a time in a normally enjoyable social environment, right? That doesn't seem like a very reasonable choice. There has to be something there. And these are the parts that we miss in our conversation and how we look at things. Selective mutism therapy is totally helpful. I'm not saying we shouldn't be doing it. I think that there's a lot of value in any kind of therapy, in any kind of supportive service. 100% agree. But we don't ask the question of why in God's good earth does a child be in a place, experience things in a certain way where they would not want to talk. Why is that happening? And why did that happen in the first place? Right? We don't ask that. And in the case of Max, a few things started really coming to light. First of all, that Max really loses his mind when he's hungry. He drops his blood sugar, and he has a really bad propensity to do that. And then I started asking the family, so what's your morning routine? Well, yeah, we have breakfast, and usually it's like cereal or pancakes, something carby. And then an hour and a half later, he goes to school. And then he has the separation anxiety too. He gets really nervous. I'm like, so you feed him a carb, and then he's in school an hour later, right when he's crashing his blood sugar. Maybe not a great idea. And then because he was so nervous in the classroom, he just wouldn't eat. So the kid that was already hypoglycemic was hypoglycemic for the entire duration until mom would pick him up. Maybe not a good idea. So one of the simplest things we did is started giving Max a ton of protein, fat, and fiber. All the things that maintain blood sugar, including complex carbs with that. And that alone changed things a little bit. The other thing that was really interesting about Max is mornings he was a complete grumpy bear. Mom's like, yeah, if I wake up Max before he's ready to be woken up, just not good. It's just not good. Literally, the mom was like, yeah, I don't mess with him in the mornings, and it takes him a while to get going. I'm like, does he also get grumpy in the afternoons a little bit? Yeah. Oh, yeah. 6-year-old. Maybe it's his adrenals. Maybe we should just do a tiny little blend of plants to support his adrenal glands. Max also had this propensity to overthink things a lot. He was the kid that was always worrying about something that may or may not be happening, had some separation anxiety even at this older age. Just this worrier type with the brain that was constantly going. And it turns out that fig and lithy tree are actually helpful for calming that down without causing any kind of unwanted side consequence. We're not talking gallons of this. We're talking 5 to 10 drops of these plants. So we put Max on some adrenal support. We normalized his blood sugar, gave him some of these calming plants, did some magnesium, did a few probiotics to help his gut. And then I just didn't hear from them for 2 months. And I'm like, so how is he doing? Oh my God. He is now going into the classroom, and we take him earlier before all the kids come, and he talked to the teacher. I'm like, you're kidding me. They're like, no, he talked to the teacher. And then a few weeks later, he talked to one of his friends in the classroom. Never happened before, even after many months of therapy. And he was still getting the therapy, but now the therapy was working. It was working really fast. And the parents are like, oh my God, he's just such a happier kid too. Mornings aren't as rough. He doesn't flip out in the afternoons. He's actually pleasant to be around. He's happier. He feels good. And guess what? When a child feels well, all of a sudden, all kinds of strange things just start going away. Now, we don't always understand why they don't feel well. We don't understand why kids act irritable, but there's a reason for that. And as we rebalance these other things, we address his adrenal glands, which calm down the sympathetic response. I've talked to you about this a bunch of times before. There's a very paradoxical effect, tired but wired, as we keep saying. Those plants, lithy tree and fig, which you can find over the counter at a lot of different places, including Amazon, these gemotherapies calm down his excessively busy mind. He was still creative. He was still totally awesome. Like he was 100% himself, but his mind just wouldn't flip out of control. The magnesium helped. We did some trace minerals. Those helped. And that combination started bringing Max into a place where he was actually functional. He was happy. He was balanced. He felt well. And through that, all of a sudden, he started achieving these things that he couldn't before. And part of what was really interesting is once we got him there, all of a sudden it became really obvious that Max also had issues with how he processed information from the world around him. He would be fine in the classroom, but then when the classroom would get too loud, Max would start becoming stressed. So now we're actually addressing the sensory issues. But you can see how all of these things come together to cause a child to shut down. Max didn't choose. There was nothing selective about his mutism. He was overwhelmed. He was so overwhelmed that he couldn't talk. That's what was going on with this poor kid. And you can't therapy your way when you're physiologically overwhelmed. You shut down. This poor kid was shutting down. And part of what really saddens me to think is, had we not addressed the underlying issues of this child, he would have gotten therapy, and at some point he would have learned to push his way through all of the overwhelm to talk, because every human being wants to connect socially, right? We all want to socialize. We all want to connect. It's a innate human need. But what would have happened to this kid when he would have turned 16? Would he then have been diagnosed with an anxiety disorder and then put on some kind of medication? Where all along his adrenal glands, his blood sugar, his gut, his other hormones, his sensory processing were all off? And this is what we do. And you know what? Again, 100 times again, I have no issue with medications. Medications serve a part. And if they're helping you, if they're helping your kid, no judgment about that at all. But let's start looking at the core things that cause us as human beings to experience the world in a certain way. And let's start looking at this, and let's start talking about it, and let's start bringing awareness around these things, because that's how we make a difference. And that's how we can change the trajectory of countless kids. Because that's the part that breaks my heart. When you look at the data, kids who have high rates of ADHD, like severe ADHD, anxiety, whatever else, their future trajectory is not very good. Like incarceration, 200 to 300% above normal people who don't have ADHD. Flunking out of college, flunking out of school, ultimately ending up in some kind of very low wage field, because ultimately, I can't imagine anyone having a good self-esteem if their brain doesn't work. Like if you just feel constantly dumb and you're the kid that's constantly getting in trouble, yes, you would end up in trouble because you think that's who you are. And this conversation isn't necessarily about selective mutism. It's about how we look at these kids and how we're taking care of these kids. Medications are fine. And if they serve a purpose, great. Therapies are great. Occupational therapy, speech therapy, whatever kind of therapy, those are great. They're helpful, no doubt. We need to first build the health, build the vitality of the child, and make them feel as healthy as possible. Help them feel as healthy as possible. And when they do that, these kids achieve things that we thought are impossible. And that's what's so cool about all of this. So thank you for watching. Thank you for being a part of our community. And thank you for getting these messages out into the world so more people hopefully can become aware of this. Be well. This is Dr. K.